Good day, everybody. I hope you guys are doing fantastic today. We are back with another beginner's guide to War Thunder, and this time we are going to be examining the ground and aviation aspects of the Russian tech tree. The Russian tech tree receives a lot of love from Gaijin as well as the player base. It is probably one of the highest played tech trees in the game, and for a very good reason. So we'll start off with the ground, and I'll get to that very good reason in a moment, but we'll start off with the ground vehicles. BT5, BT7, BT7M, very good light tanks with a very punchy gun, very capable of punching well above its weight class. The T series, the T28s and T26, lots of survivability, slightly lacking in the gun department, but not enough to make it cripplingly slow, but still a very good tank and a very derpy tank to play, all things considered. The T26, T60, and T70 are probably the ones that lack the most in this tech tree. They're really not good. The T60 is probably the only one that's redeeming due to the autocannon that the T70 also then inherits, but otherwise, it's really not a great tank, to put it very lightly. You can have some success. I'm not saying that it's a terrible tank, but compared to other things that sit in the tech tree, these are probably the ones that you're not going to play all that much, especially now since you don't have to carry them through anymore. The SU-51 and SU-76 are great self-propelled guns and tank destroyers, and they are pretty punchy as well. They can punch fairly decently above their weight class, taking out heavy tanks of the enemy, as well as light tanks and pretty much anything else that stands in their way, including open tops, because they have a high explosive round. The Gaz AA M4M and the Gaz AA Dush are both very good self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, or platforms rather. They are capable to a limited degree of taking out ground targets, but when it comes to aerial targets, they are pretty strong in that regard. The T50, pretty much similar to the T126. T50 is a smaller T34 and it plays very similarly. If you angle, you'll survive quite long and you can do a substantial amount of damage with your 45mm cannon. The T34s all the way through, even to the T3457, and all the way up to the T3485, all possess the same characteristics. If the tank is at an angle, you have an increased enhanced artificial survivability, as well as being able to deal out a substantial amount of damage with all of the cannons that the T34s are fitted with, and most especially the 85. Excuse me, guys. The T28E that leads onto the KV1 series. The T28s I've already covered down below, but the KV1s are exceptionally durable. They have a substantial amount of armor. The massive weakness that you have is your driver port and the immediate sides of your mantlet. But by and large, it's a very survivable tank, and you can get quite a fair amount of work done. The KV1S is also pretty decent. It's the same pretty much as the KV85. And like I said, with the T34s, the KV series tanks are pretty much the same all the way through. They've got really solid armor and they've got pretty reliable guns. The T80, pretty much the same as as the T70 series, at 2.0 rather. It's okay, it can get stuff done. It's the same 45 that sits on the T50, so it's got a punchy-ish gun, but the armor is somewhat lacking. The self-propelled gun line of the early Soviet tree will greet you with the SU series and the ZIS-30 as well as the Yag-10. All of these, including most especially rather the ZIS-30, are very potent. The Soviet SPGs are more like super heavy SPGs generally. They have an insane amount of armor by and large, and they've got really large caliber guns which allow you to overpressure your enemies quite easily. The Yag-10 is a great gun because it's got a fairly straight velocity on exit and has a large amount of killing power. The Gaz AA continued. This one has a 72k gun on it, and it is pretty decent. It's not great, it's not terrible. You want to kind of get to the BTRs and the ZIS-12s as quickly as possible. T3457 I've already covered. The ZSU-37 is okay. It's a bit difficult to use because the turret reverse is quite slow, but it's still pretty decent. You can get quite a fair amount of work done. The ISU, or the SU-152, and then the ISU-152, I have played this tank in the Chinese tech tree, and it is insanely good. Um, if you're not into super heavy SPGs, like I am not, as you can see, I haven't done any of the SPGs, um, then I would avoid the Russian line because they are pretty much almost entirely super heavy SPGs up to the 2S, sorry, and the 2S3M. But even then, it goes back down, and then you've got missile carriers. So all of these SPGs are quite heavy. They've got really good armor, really good guns, but very vulnerable from the side and the back. Um, sorry. In terms of light and medium options available to you at rank 4, you've got the BTR and the M53 for AA, both of which are very good. The ASU 85 is an SPG, very light armor, but an extremely powerful 85 gun with heat FS, if I'm not mistaken, and the PT 76B, the lawnmower of the lake. It's got a decent enough gun, and it comes with heat FS as well. IS series tanks are very good, very reliable, very notorious. I won't go too heavily into them, but they have a substantial amount of armor, and those guns are extremely dangerous to pretty much anybody in front of them. The T-44 series tank is also pretty good in terms of its firepower. It's got a 85mm Zis S53 cannon, and it's got some insanely sloped armor, so it can survive quite a lot. It also lacks a machine gun port, which makes it a little bit more survivable. In terms of late game play, really you're looking forward to a lot of really good stuff. The T10M is a very dangerous heavy tank. You've got a lot of BMPs, which are insanely good with their missiles, including the BMP-3, which has a very much near vertical gun traverse, so it can track a aircraft as well and be an AA. The T-72 and T-64 series tanks, although very, very good, have a very, very slow reverse gear, so that often gets you killed. And the T-80 series tanks and T-90 series tanks are absolute beasts. The T-72B3 is pretty decent, but if I had to choose between the two, I'd take out a T-80 BMV. That is all for the ground vehicles. Let's quickly squiz the aviation aspect. So I'm not going to cover the top tier aspect of it because most people will know what happens at top tier with the MiG 29, 23, 29. Yeah, MiG 29 SMT. So with the aviation, I'll just go up to like rank 5. So first off, you have I-16, which is very fast and very maneuverable for a monoplane, and the I-15 is arguably the most maneuverable biplane in reserve tier. Probably only second to the Japanese, but that's because they're the Japanese. They build planes to turn first before they fly. The SB series bombers, Yak 4 and the AR 2 are very, very good bombers, but your Yak 2 Carb is the best, at least in this bracket here, the best CAS aircraft that you'll have access to. The I-15s can also carry a limited amount of ground ordnance, so that is also an option. MiG 3s, Yak 1s, all of these fighters are insanely good. You really can't go wrong with Russian fighters. They have very good armament, generally equipped with a cannon or a large caliber machine gun, and they're very, very fast for what they are. The Russian fighters are very, very good. I cannot speak badly about them, other than perhaps they like to set on fire quite easily. But other than that, they're pretty good aircraft. The Illusion 2s, pretty infamous as well if you've been playing the game long enough. The IL-2s have a very strong reputation as being very almost unkillable because they have so much armor and they can be absolute flying tanks. They carry a lot of armor, they carry a lot of armament, but they are very slow. So that is the trade-off that you get. The bombers for the Russians are pretty solid. Look, I mean, I don't play them all that often, but they're a lot more maneuverable than, say, the British or even the Germans and Americans. The Russian bombers are not really long-range bombers per se, aside from the PE-8. They're more medium range, but in the grander scheme of things, they can fly quite far. They have the maneuverability rather of a medium-range bomber. The PE-8 was, up until the Lancaster was added, had the biggest bomb, and it was the record holder for that. It still carries a very large bomb, and it can still do absolute insane amounts of damage to an enemy team if you're dropping it on their cluster. And then in terms of later CAS aircraft, the TU-2 and the IL-10s are all very, very, very good. In terms of premiums available to you, you can go for the Su-39, though I wouldn't advise it because it's an incredibly complex aircraft to keybind to in this game. The SU-25K, however, is very good, as well as the MiG-23ML. The MiG-21 SR-13-300 is also very good, as well as the SU-11 and the SU-6. All are very good. In terms of your early opening aircraft, you now get this I-15 BIS as opposed to Zhukov's one. So just a minor change there. If you choose Russia to start off with, you get the T-26 First Guard Tank Brigade. In terms of the starter pack, I believe you get the T-162. If I'm not mistaken, but at any rate, the premiums for the Russian tech tree are pretty much complementary to your main tech tree. So really, you can't go all that wrong. They pretty much are. There's a lot of repetition in the premiums. Let's just leave it at that. So that's all in all about the Russian tech tree. So in summary, you have very good armor, you have very punchy guns, and you have a fair amount of mobility. And also, this is why it's very popular with a lot of new players. It's a very forgiving nation to play. Russia has a lot of very forgiving tanks. The T-34 series tanks are very forgiving on new players, and it's a very minimal learning curve in comparison to the other nations that I have gone over. But that is all I have time for now, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate the eyes on. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. And if you want to see another one, please consider leaving a subscribe. And until next time, guys, Cannon out.